You mentioned like the light, okay, like the light strands that
Sorry.
are no problem, that are reactive to sound or different lights. I mean, there's lots of ways we can start messing with that. But what we've realized is like we need to build a common foundation. So week one, the rock, paper, scissors, and the dice. Some of you are looking at that like, I can make that 10 minutes. Great. But what we're going to ask you to do is to not just make that in 10 minutes, but to make it as fast as you can, as quickly as you want to, but to map it against the micro credentials for programming and for physical computing. So in these, I'll just walk through the first one with you quickly here as an example. So if you're making the rock, paper, scissors and the dice game, what we want to look at are like, how many of these look fors are you documenting as you work through the process? So don't just come up with workarounds to be like, I don't know exactly the right way to do this, but I could probably figure out how to make a dice with a random number generator. Like that's great. That's an important muscle to develop. But also in physical computing, and in order to get to more rigorous computer science, we've got to be able to do all of these things. Like these are important things to be able to do. The way the micro credentials have been designed is to work sort of as you go from programming basics to programming with loops, logic, and variables, to programming with arrays, to working with functions. They get increasingly complex, but they get increasingly more empowering. So as you can do these things, you can do more stuff. As a real tangible example of that, programming with basics, you can use in just the programming with basics skills to make a rock, paper, scissors. Like when I shake my microbit, it shows a rock and then randomly shows a scissors icon or randomly shows a paper icon. That's pretty straightforward. It's a pretty basic skill from a computing standpoint. Once we get to programming with arrays, once this is mastered, you'd be able to take like an LED strip, an individually addressable LED strip, and create custom animations from scratch without using existing libraries. That's a much more complicated skill. It requires you to have a fundamental understanding of looping, of conditionals, of array management, of asset management within arrays. There's a lot of sort of computing that's going on behind the scenes. So they're pretty massive leaps. This is just 3 micro credentials, but they are gigantic leaps from here to here. So you'll see in the first month, we don't even make it here. We're still just going to be playing in this space because there's going to be some time. We're going to have to dig into 5 or 6 versions of what this looks like to sort of get, I don't want to say increasingly complicated, but to make sure we've really mastered a deep understanding of loops, logic, and variables before we get into that next level. That'll be consistent both in programming and in the physical computing and electronics side. Some of the feedback we've heard along the way is that like, I kind of understand the logic of how to code what I want my system to do, but like I never can figure out how to hook up an LCD screen, or my sensors don't talk properly to my system. Like when I plug in a motion sensor, it never reads right. And so we want to make sure that we're providing support around both of the physical side, which is kind of page 2 of that document, and the logic and computing side, which is essentially page 1. There's obviously in computing way more than 4 skills that we need to have cultivated. But the goal of this isn't to be masters of computer science, it's to be fully functional in physical computing systems. So we know that if you have mastered these 4 or 5 skills, that's a strong foundation to then be able to have really intelligent conversations and engage with thought partners like from the community that Matthew's talking about, to really kind of dig in deep on some sophisticated solution and designs that are really where our students want to play. And I think that's I don't want to wax too philosophical here, but I think that's an important concept for us to keep as a North Star, is that so much of the other work in our fab labs, basically all of the other work in our fab labs, part of the hook is it's so real, right? Like you can make real things. But with computing, most of our labs right now with computing, it's relegated to like kind of sort of what I wanted to do, but I don't really know how to do it. So I had to like dummy it down big time and make sacrifices in my design because I couldn't bring my real vision to reality. So we want to build this base with our teachers so we can support our students to bring their real visions to reality. That's a major driver for us behind the scenes on this. I don't know that I need to unpack all of those documents. I want to pause there for questions, comments, thoughts. We'll spend a little bit of time on the back end here talking about some of the nuts and bolts of how we can interact and how we'd like to see the groups interacting at schools. Any other questions that are coming up? We do have some questions for y'all on the back end about some logistics things for the group, how we can be best supportive of y'all. So I'll ask those in a moment. So, so sort of in that lane, part of how we want to engage with you all as the cohort leaders, we'd like to meet with you monthly. Our goal would be to get out ahead of this. So we're assuming most schools are still in the recruiting phase. If you want to go ahead and launch this, like whenever, this week, next week at your school, that's fine. If you want to wait till maybe the end of quarter 1 and then launch it, that's fine as well. Ideally, what we'd love to have you do is try to get out a week ahead. But if not, at least engage with us for the month, where obviously our monthly meetings will not be us telling you everything we've done today, sort of philosophically, here's what we're trying to do, but instead spend our time together working through, kind of walking you through each of the design challenges and some things to look for as you go to like engage. We don't want to do these challenges together with you, but we just want to get you sort of moving forward and give you a chance to react to them, ask questions, and ask for any address any clarification issues that we may need to address along the way. What you'll see in these is we tried to identify the recommended micro-credentials, which you have that document already that unpacks those. The recommended micro-credentials you want to pay attention to as you get into this. And then I'll stop sharing my screen after this, but just a quick note. One of the things we stumbled into that's been pretty powerful already is the look-fors in the micro-credentials have been written in such a way that if you just substitute in the word for whatever system you're using, like Arduino or Microbit, and then type in that micro-credential, you can almost always find pretty simple, pithy, and useful tutorials on that exact component. That's true almost always for just about any of the look-fors. So if you're like, program uses at least one variable, including an indexing variable, to break out of the loop, out of the for loop, you're like, I don't even know what that means. How would I know if I did it? Like literally, if you copy and paste that into Google and you just replace program with like Microbit uses or Arduino uses, or just using an indexing variable to break out of a for loop on Arduino, you'll get a gajillion tutorials right there. So we've tried to not overscript things, but just as a tip, the look-fors are written in such a way that like it's going to create some common vocabulary for us over time, and it becomes very searchable to look for support as you're working independently, asynchronously. So I guess the summary there is we'd love to meet with you all monthly to go through the upcoming design challenges, or to talk through them, address issues or clarifications that are needed, and prepare you to support that work. Then the idea is that you would convene your group. Maybe it's just 30 minutes a week, maybe it's 15 minutes a week, but you would convene the group at your school weekly to hold each other accountable, as Matthew said, and to provide support as your teachers and your cohort work through the design challenges for each week in the month. And then we'd love to have folks tracking through those micro-credentials through that sheet that I sent that's in the folder there, to sort of track your progress through that. Eventually, we could probably do that through Fabfolio, but frankly, it feels like a reach. A Fabfolio just would introduce a system, I think makes things cloudy, so we probably won't do that. I think just tracking it in this sort of simple form is probably the cleanest way. That's really going to support our focus best. So I'll stop there. Questions, comments, anything we can do to be more supportive? We do have a question from our end. For our monthly meetings, would you prefer, and you could put this in the chat if you'd like, we'd love to know, would you prefer to meet in person or on Zoom? That's up to you. And we're thinking these will be 30 to 45-minute meetings monthly. We don't want to take too much of your time. So I'll say, I'm happy to do whatever. Emily's happy to do whatever. You all are leaving schools at different times of day. So we've got to be mindful of that. We're also going to ask, so the first question is, would you rather meet in person or remotely for our monthly meetings? And then the next question is 4 o'clock a reasonable time for you? It looks like Zoom is winning. Okay, well, that's all that question. Great. I completely agree, and that works for us as well. Great. And we may try to get together once or twice in person throughout the year. But I agree, for these kinds of things, I hate to drive across town for a 30-minute meeting. That never seems to make sense. Okay, Matthew, Emily, anything to add? And for the group, any other questions for the good of the group? Obviously, feel free to reach out to us. Our goal will be to get these sent out a couple weeks ahead of time. What do you mean by hardware, Lisa?
The microbits for the cohort.
Oh, like giving the cohort microbits? So if you have microbits at your school and you can use those, great. If you need them, just let me know. You can send me a message, let me know how many you need. Oh, that was the other hardware we did forget. I forgot to mention. So we are ordering sensor kits, and we'll be able to provide sensors that you'll need for each system. We were supposed to be in person today. Thank you all for pivoting on a last minute change this morning. We're supposed to be at the GCDI this afternoon and switch to Zoom. I will have those, and we'll get those distributed to you. So I'll just need to know how many you need. But we can provide all the sensors for all the participants that you have. And whether if you need microbits, just let me know. They are super hard to come by, but we've got a small stockpile. So they've been on back order for 2 years in the US. But we've been buying them from a UK vendor. So anyways, we've got a handful of them. I'm sure we can get them to you if you don't have them. We definitely have enough to distribute for the kinds of numbers we're talking about. So please do let me know if you just need microbits or Arduinos. We got plenty of Arduinos. But we will be providing you. So we'll just need to know how many people are in your cohort, and we'll be providing you with all of the input and output sensors that you need as we work through the thing. That part we want to standardize, just so that anytime we talk about connections and we're troubleshooting on Slack, we'd like for everybody to be using the same accelerometer and the same LCD screen, so we have, we can be consistent with the troubleshooting. Eventually we want to have the capacity to like navigate lots of different options, but right out of the gate, lots of different options is just a pain for everybody, and it can be debilitating. So we'll take care of purchasing that and getting that distributed to everyone. Yeah. So if you could just send Emily and myself a email with your numbers as they come along, and feel free to sort of rough estimate. If you think like I'm probably going to end up with 5 teachers, great, just go ahead and tell us 5. These sensors are super cheap. The majority of them are less than $1 a piece, so we're not talking about significant amounts of money. We will try to make sure everything we do, works across platforms in terms of like Mac and PC. Most of it can be done on Chromebook as well. Sorry, that's what I thought you meant by hardware first. It's like, use your computer. I don't know what to tell you.
I do want to say, y'all let me be like, oh my gosh, Michael's late, when really I just changed the meeting time on everybody without consulting anyone. So sorry about that. In my head, it was at 3:30. Sorry about randomly changing the time on you guys.
I wasn't going to say anything, but I definitely had it as 4. So Emily, if you don't mind to put that link to the Google Drive back in the chat one more time, that'd be great for folks that came for the 4 o'clock meeting that started at 3:30. So they can grab that. So that's got your design challenges that I was showing on my screen, and the rubric that we'll use to sort of guide our learning. And any other questions, comments? We don't need to belabor here. Getting you out 10 minutes early is not a bad thing. Great. I hope this is exciting and in a positive lane for you. As Matthew said earlier, like, we just haven't figured out how to get through this and really like support you all in a way that's like meaningful in this space. So we're hoping that this sort of mini cohort and then cohort of you as leaders can really help us move the needle, and just build more capacity in terms of like computing and such. I think there's going to be real power and opportunity if we all come together and work together. And Matthew's going to bring tremendous connections with the community, and the opportunity to do that. And our goal, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this at the GCDI on the 8th, in August. Our goal is to be able to provide you with a maker mentor for you and your school. That can be like a dedicated mentor in the CS space. That's sort of the piece we're still really got some lift to do. But I expect that to happen sooner than later. Regardless, I think we need to jump in, get moving on the challenges, sort of get the ball rolling. We can definitely get through the first probably 2 months without needing access to outside expertise. But we are, just so you're aware, we're working diligently on the back end to make sure that happens, because it's not just we need people who know more about computing, but we need people who think differently about computing, who aren't going to just think about it from an academic standpoint, but can really help us blend creativity, the arts, and computing, and play in that space. And I think we've got a real unique opportunity to do that in our community, and you all can bring the academic side to that in your schools' classrooms. Thank you, everybody. I know it's a long day on a Monday. It's 4:20. We got you out 10 minutes early, and we actually got you out like 40 minutes early since we weren't supposed to start till 4. So found time is a good time. Thank you, guys. Feel free to reach out by email if you need anything, and please do email Emily and myself with your numbers, even just rough estimated numbers. Just estimate a little high so we can make sure we have enough kits and sensors for everyone. Thank you, guys. See ya.